I was on Bobby Umar's a little while ago. Enjoyed it so much, decided I'm gonna do my own. And I figured I would use my Substack Live to talk about some of the stuff that I'm building. And I have an idea plan for kind of a recurring thing that I'm going to do where I'm going to take people through how I use my Notion SuperBrain just to give ideas. And one of the reasons I'm doing it on Substack is I really like that at the end of the live video, it gives you a bunch of clips you can use for Reels and TikTok and YouTube. So I think that's pretty cool. So today I figured what I would do in the very first one is I'm going to go through the SuperBrain 3.0 release and talk a little bit about what makes this one different than the previous two iterations of the SuperBrain. I think this is the biggest release I've ever done on SuperBrain, and it's the one that I'm actually going to put my full weight behind talking about because it has some of those features that I thought were really missing from the first two to make it easy to use for the average person or for someone who just wants to have a really powerful AI system out of the box. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what the SuperBrain is, it just in high level, because I have an entire video series. If you look on my Substack or if you go back through my YouTube videos, you will see there's an entire playlist that's just all about what is the SuperBrain. And I don't go deep into the AI portion of it yet. I have a whole nother video series that's going to be planned for that. I may even do that right here on Substack. But today I want to go through what is different about the 3.0 release that was not necessarily the same in the 2.0 and the 1.0 release. If it doesn't make sense, I promise that it will as we go through it. So the SuperBrain began as a knowledge management system, like a personal knowledge management system. Some people use Tiago Forte's second brain with their para system. I don't love it. So I kind of went and I built my own. I took pieces from David Allen's GTD. I took pieces from Tiago Forte's second brain, from the Zettelkasten method. I looked all around and I tried to figure out something that would work for me, but that would also be easy to understand where things go so that everything has a home. That's kind of my digital principle, is that there's got to be a way for everything to have a home. And little did I know that, a few short years after coming up with my system, that there would be this whole AI revolution, and that these AI tools work really well if you give them a structured set of instructions or structured knowledge to be able to follow breadcrumbs to find what they need. So you either have to explicitly tell an AI, hey, I want you to work on this file, or you have to give it an easy way of wayfinding to find what it's looking for. And so I kind of inadvertently, in building a knowledge management system that would work for my brain, also built one that worked really well for AI. Because one of the things that this does different than Para, and from if you're an AI geek and you've looked at the Karpathy LLM wiki conversation, is that rather than having a flat wiki or having a simple projects, areas, resources, archive system, the SuperBrain has a bunch of important nodes that we all pretty much have in our lives. We have our notes, we have our memories, we have our people. People would be connected to companies. And so there's this whole web of interconnected nodes that then have kind of the offshoots from them. And because they're all connected through relational databases, I can say, I need you to find a note about this person. And the AI knows to go and find that person, then find the connected notes, or to go to the notes and then find the connected person. Or I could say, I need you to find, a memory about, in my memories, I need you to find an interaction about this deal that I had in my pipeline. And it can go to my memory section, the update feed, and it can then sort by a particular deal. So by having that interconnected web, it's a structured knowledge management system. And then that means that the AI knows both how to read it and also how to write to it. So that was the original SuperBrain, was that structure. And then when the AI came, I really just layered it on top inside of Notion. So a really smart system. So the 1.0 of the SuperBrain system introduced roles and skills and resources and memory as different databases so that you could invoke a role like a copywriter or a social media manager or a strategist. It would then have different skills. This was an idea taken from Claude, which inside of Claude, you have skills. And so I created skills for my roles, and then I gave it context in the form of either resources, things like, here are my brand guidelines, or, here's how to do keyword research. And then I could also give it a memory. So I could say, hey, I want you to remember that thing that I just told you, because inside Notion AI, you have to tell it to remember things, but then you have to give it a place to put those memories. And this is different from Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, which kind of keep their own memory, but they decide, those AIs decide what they're going to remember. So I wanted a system where I could be a little bit more deliberate about what gets remembered. So that was the 1.0 version. The 2.0, what I tried to introduce was kind of a more automatic memory logging. I didn't want to have to keep telling it each time. I want you to remember this. I wanted it to remember each thread so that I could say, hey, remember last week when we talked about whatever? And so I introduced the first version of that. And it was good, but it was a little buggy. Um, and so the big update in 2.0 was really trying to improve memory, and it was trying to optimize the instructions in the initial loading. Because one of the things I discovered in moving from 1.0 to 2.0 is I was really looking at how do we optimize for token usage? How do we optimize for the context window? So that we're not, if we have a context window of this big, we don't want to use like, all that just for the initial instructions. So I started looking into how that works because the 1.0 version had some very long instructions. And so in 2.0, I started to try and dial that in and started looking at eager loading versus lazy loading, meaning having the AI only load what it needs to load initially and then going and getting everything else that it would need. So the 2.0, I would say, was really, man, I guess I would call it sort of the foundation on which 3.0 was built. And so the different bugs that I was getting in 2.0 is good, the 2.0 version, but it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. So I sat down and I thought a lot about like, well, what's going on here? What is the problem and based on how this thing works? And so I went back to the drawing board entirely and I took a couple big ideas and started playing with them. And one of those ideas was really upgrading how roles worked inside of Notion. Um, and so what I did is I optimized the instructions so that your initial boot instructions would be nice and lean, and then it would go into the proper role on your digital team based upon what you ask for. So instead of just looking at my face this entire time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you what I mean by these roles. Um, so on my team, these are all of my roles. These are all the different team members I have. They do different things, from really serious, heavy strategy stuff. Like Veronica is my PR titan. She really helps me with everything related to promotion and visibility and press. Jeeves is an SEO. Stark is my CTO. At the bottom here, we have Cortado. Cortado just helps me to track what I want to know about the types of coffee that I like. So it helps me dial in how I brew with my French press or mocha pot or whatever brewing pour overs. It tracks what coffees I like. It tracks what coffees I don't like. And it really helps me to get the best cup of coffee in the morning. So I have, ones that are really important and then ones that are a lot lighter. So that's how these roles work. Now, like I said, in the last version of these roles, what I wound up getting was the original role instructions were just really a personality and some calibrated context around how confident it would be in the information it delivers. Does it only talk about things it knows to be true, or will it lean a little bit towards like, maybe try this? And if you're dealing with, a brainstorming role or some sort of a strategist role, you can kind of flex a little bit on that. But when you're dealing with, say, a researcher, you want that to really be dialed in. So I have this whole context dials system that I use. I'll show it to you in here. But the calibrated context, we have confidence, creativity, clarification, and curiosity. And this is about confidence is about the information it gives you. Creativity is about the methods and how outside the box it'll go versus just delivering what's asked for. Clarification is how many follow-up questions it's going to ask to make sure that it knows exactly what you're asking it for. Because sometimes, the AIs will they'll ask a lot of questions and you're like, kind of just go do the work. This isn't that hard. And then curiosity is where it will bring in things that maybe you haven't thought of. So each role gets a 1 through 5 dial system that I created in the 1.0 system, and I've been using it ever since. And so what you would get in the 2.0 version of this is you would just basically get a personality in the context. And what I did this time around is that every one of these AI that I've created now, every one of these roles has a new system that I've built into it. So the 3.0, the big update here, and I'm going to make note that this is 9 minutes and 43 seconds into here that I got to the big reveal here, is that I've designed each role now with a new structure. And that new structure is that each role is going to have an identity. And there's some components that are included in there. It's going to have a memory. and I'll tell you what those are in a second, and it has intelligence. So just like almost a person on your team, you would have an identity, memory, and intelligence. And then I've also built at the end of it a learning and growth loop that helps each of these roles to get better over time. So I'll explain each of those real quickly. So and we'll go into one of the most powerful roles, probably the most powerful role in the SuperBrain system that I built is Atlas. Atlas is the role that helps to build all of the roles, all of the skills, all of the workflows. So anything that you're building into your AI system, Atlas is the one that builds it. And what I'm probably going to be doing as a follow-up series to this is Breakfast with Atlas. And with that, I'm just going to essentially open up a screen share. I'm going to show you exactly how I'm building stuff using Atlas into my own system, and then you can replicate it yourself. So what I did is that I went back to the drawing board on the thread logging, and instead of having it at the Notion AI level, I put it at the role level. And every single time that I load a role, whether that's explicitly by saying become Atlas or by just talking about the sorts of tasks that Atlas does, like building roles or skills, at which case it would consult the dispatch table and it would load into the correct role. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to log the thread. So what it does is it has a little thread inside of the memory database. And what it'll do is it'll just create one little entry. And I'll just show you real quick in here. So it just puts the date, it puts like a couple sentences or a sentence or so, and then a link to the thread. This way I can say, hey, remember when we talked about, the 3.0 installer, deleting roles and archiving older versions or any of these things. It'll go, oh yeah, that. And here's what we talked about and here's how we fixed it, et cetera. So it now has a memory and it dates it and it goes all the way back. So the first thing it does is it updates its short-term memory. So now the roles remember you. Now in identity, we give it a job, like here's what you do. We give it a personality, real straightforward and simple. You don't need a lot of personality in these AIs. You just need them to talk. Beliefs, I think this is a good thing to have sort of a guiding principle for it. Nice and short. A little background. Some of these I have are longer than others, but the background is basically saying like, hey, you have a background in building businesses, or you've been a copywriter for 20 years or whatever. This is that whole role part of prompt engineering. And then communication style just gives it a little bit about that. So the identity is notably shorter than maybe I've done it in the past, and that's because I found that this actually doesn't serve all that much to make better quality things. You want to kind of get through it and give it a little bit of background so it knows who it is. What's really important, and I'm going to come back to method in a second, is like, what does it need to be able to do? So everything above this line right here, thinking and up, this is all eager loaded, which means every session, every role boots all of this. And that's really important because it keeps it nice and light. That is a very light instruction page, what I'm showing here. Method is mutable, meaning that these are the 10 principles that this role will follow as it does its work. And the AI keeps this list up to date based upon working together. So as you work with a particular role, it's going to update its method, and it's limited to 10 principles. So this helps it to really stay tight and lean about what it is that it's supposed to be doing, and it learns from working with you. Extremely important new thing that I built into here. So each role does get smarter over time. Then there's the thinking table. The thinking table is now where it understands what to load next. It essentially routes it to the next part of the rest of this page, which I'll go through in a second. But essentially what you have here is like, here's your short-term memory. Each role in intelligence is going to get domain knowledge. So this is, if you're building an expert on social media, in domain knowledge, you want it to know everything about Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and TikTok and all that. You want it to have essentially individual pages that are deep research on that. And I have a researcher role that's now built directly into the SuperBrain that'll do that. The skill tree is the full list of all of the skills that this role has access to and what it would be doing. So it can turn to a skill tree to know what skill to invoke. The operational resources right here are going to be all the things it needs to do its job, but they're basic. They're not domain research or domain intelligence. They're just things that it'll need. After that, you're going to have its logic and decision framework. This is how it thinks. So this is if this, then that. So if Jeff asks me, answers for me to question 2, then build it for Jeff, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives a logic for how the role is going to think. Then next thing up in the thinking is if it's looking for something in the workspace. I have a workspace search protocol. So this teaches it how to go and find things. And this is built directly into SuperBrain OS makes it nice and easy. And then there's learning and growth, which is all the way at the bottom here. This shows it how to learn more. And so Scout is the researcher. So if a new subject needs to be added to the um, domain knowledge, and we tell the role that, it's going to invoke the role of Scout, which is the researcher. It will go out and it'll do deep domain research on it, and it'll come back. It'll create a new resource, and then it'll add it right here into the domain knowledge. So the long and short of it is that each role now has an identity. It has both long and short-term memory. So in this memory section over here, you have both the short-term memory. This is the thread log that after every 100 will get essentially compressed and a new one will be created. So you'll just have an ongoing memory. But then you have these long-term memories, and the purpose of these are the things that you want each role to remember. And before, all of the memories were in the persistent database, the persistent memory database. And so it would have to search through the whole database. And instead, now we've given it a very specific, here are your memories. So each role kind of gets its own memory now, rather than needing to share it with all of the rest of the roles. And I'll give you an example that's just really practical of how this works. If I go to Cortado here, my coffee expert, Cortado has a memory about my coffee preferences. It has my coffee database. This lists all the different coffees from different roasters that I'm going to be looking at, and it's going to look at different. It's going to capture different information about it, my ratings, what's up next, ways that I brewed it, and things like that. And then I have my brew experiments, and that will essentially, as I'm trying different, grinds and water and things like that, it'll remember it there. So when I ask Cortado, hey, how much water should I dilute this coffee concentrate with, it will it'll search in these long-term memories. So essentially, each role gets a specific memory that's its own. It gets its own short-term memory for its threads. So you can kind of talk to every role as if it's its own person or member of your team. And that's one of the really, really big things that I think has been built into this. Beyond that, in 3.0, just a couple other things to cover. All of the instructions have been optimized. All of the and that's through using a lot of different protocols. So just checking in on different things. All this is just built into the SuperBrain now. So it just makes it super easy. You don't have to think about these things. It knows what to load, when to load it. We've streamlined out skills and much better memory. And there's two new AI roles that get included in every SuperBrain now, and that's Scout and Mimic. So Scout is the researcher, does deep, deep research, and Mimic is the copywriter. So it can write for any platform, and it'll just take your brand guidelines and write in your own voice. And then we added both workflows and weekly chores. Workflows are just multi-role, multi-skill steps that can be followed one after another. And you can just plan those out, and then you can run them whenever. So one I have is a weekly thread cleanup. It'll go back through, it'll find every open thread, and it'll just close out those skills, add a little bit more context. So, we can essentially give our AI some weekly chores now, and then just with a single command, send it off to go and do those chores. So I have it clean up my meeting nodes. I have it clean up the threads. I have it look through short-term memory and figure out what to promote to long-term memory, things like that. So that's a pretty good overview of what the 3.0 release is. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful. It remembers you. It outputs everything with fewer errors and fewer hallucinations, and just right to what you're trying to do. And pretty excited about the release. So go and check it out. I'll put a link to the 3.0 release in the Notion Marketplace. But members of the Superhero Institute, when they get to level 4, or they become a premium or VIP member, they get access to the full SuperBrain OS 3.0 release. So very, very cool. Go check it out. And I'll be back at some point to just show you how to use Atlas, how to build stuff in Atlas, and how amazingly simple it is to build your own incredibly powerful AI system inside of Notion. So with that, I will see you on another one. Thanks.